Hello, my DP friends. Um, I hope you're enjoying your summer break. I know it is about the second or third week of summer for you guys. Um, we had a couple extra days, so I'm not quite sure where you are. Um, when you left school or you came and you turned in your technology, you should have picked up a copy of the summer reading and the summer reading packet. I wanted to touch base with you a little bit about this text, why we chose this text, and how this text is going to be beneficial moving forward. And I also wanted to kind of just review with you some of the notes that I've taken from the preface of Pygmalion and from Act 1. So we have two different versions, not versions, but two different looking books of Pygmalion. Mine looks like this. I know there's a couple of you who got this book. Some of you have a cover that looks different, and it's actually smaller. If you have this book and you haven't looked at it yet, don't panic. It's not really this long. There's some extra information here in the back, about a sequel, and then the author's notes start at page 153. And then there's just interpretations and critical experts and questions for discussion. Okay, so the play itself, as you get to, is about 150 pages. When I was going over this play, I listened to it using the link that I sent you guys. Plays are meant to be heard, so you should listen. I highly encourage you to look in your text as you listen to the audio. The translation that I sent you from LibriVox is not 100% the same. They don't do all of the stage direction that you have in your book, or at least in my version of the book. But the actual text part is the same. So Pygmalion was originally a poem by Ovid, or Ovid, whoever you want to call him, about a sculptor named Pygmalion who falls in love with a statue. And then Pygmalion, he prays to Aphrodite to bring the statue to life. And she does that for him. And so this idea of a creation being part of man's life is part of the focus of this play. It's not our total central focus. There's going to be a couple other things that we look at, but Pygmalion, this version that's written by George Bernard Shaw, is really it's out of convention for Victorian theater. He was influenced by I think a German playwright who favored more realistic and tragic stories of the middle class. So before this, the Victorian theater was full of dramatic show and large costumes, whereas this is meant to be more of a realistic representation of what life is like for people. There's a whole literature movement that you may have gone over with Mr. D about that. So just to give you some time period background, this is written at the earliest 20th century. So right in the early 1900s, in London, and in London, which is in England, which is in Europe, if you aren't familiar, there's rigid class distinctions. So almost like a hierarchy of who can do what, and who has what kind of job, and who wears what clothes, and who can marry who. All of these things play a huge role in society, in Victorian society. And so many of the families of high society clung to these ideals and this class distinction despite their dwindling fortunes. So whether they invested badly or their family money had just been spent, the money was not coming as readily as it had been. And so while they were running out of money, they continued to engage in these elaborate, expensive lifestyles. For example, women would buy silk garments, things that were showy and elaborate. And men, while they were educated, they considered themselves superior to men who worked in business or trade. The educated men didn't really do anything except spend other people's money. So but they looked down on people who did work for a living and who earned their money. If you've looked at the beginning of the play, you have seen some like pretty difficult to distinguish speech. And it has to do with Eliza's accent. It's from a part of London that is meant for like a working class resident. And Eliza is what's essentially a stereotypical middle class, lower class woman of this time. She lives alone in a big tenement house as part of the Industrial Revolution, or the aftermath of the Industrial Revolution. She's pretty uneducated. She's never taken a proper bath like in her whole life. She lived with no heat, no running water. And she started working after 9 years of schooling. So essentially she is your age, or she would have been your age when she stopped going to school. Historically, the World War I brought changes to British society, and millions of working class men and women went to war. And there was this new political party called the New Labour Party, which gave the working class a political voice. And women earned that right to vote first in 1918 and then again in 1928 there in England. And so Pygmalion became a voice for the lower class and how a lower class person or a middle class person can change themselves, can recreate themselves, can be molded into a person of high class. And this book, this play, has been very popular. It was created, they use this as inspiration for My Fair Lady of Pygmalion, or My Fair Lady and Pygmalion are like super similar. One is a musical, one is a play. And it was released in New York in 1956. And then finally, My Fair Lady, the film, was released in 1964. That is your overview of Pygmalion. Some of the things I want you to consider as you read this work, if you haven't started to already, is how does Eliza represent people from poor communities today? So we want to think about why this text, okay? Why Pygmalion? So how can Eliza represent people from today? How can language affect how we view others, and in what ways? So do we put too much emphasis on the way people speak? Do we judge people by the vernacular that they use, or the colloquialisms that they have, or in just the general way that they present themselves through their speech? What other texts or media share the ideas or themes presented in the play? And you have some theme analysis coming your way in a little bit. How does the modality impact how readers interact with the text? So based on modality just means like the type of text. So because it's a play, how does that play a role in how we consume or interact with the text? And thinking about what larger global issue can you pull from this text? So think about like the world as a whole and your world as a 21st century person. And how can your life be impacted, or how can you see the themes in this book in your world? So that's it for your overview of Pygmalion and your review of its historical context. The next video I'm going to share with you will have my notes from Act 1. It'll be kind of like a summary going over the stuff. Okay. So if you need anything, don't feel obligated to need anything, but if you do need something, please reach out to me. I'm available by email, by Google Voice. I'm going to send you guys that number in this email. So happy reading.